Welcome back. We're keeping our focus on security in the country, and well, we're going to have a bit of a different perspective this time around. We've got Dr. Akintunde Akinwumi, who is a lawyer, is a medical doctor, is also currently a British Army officer. And then we'll have Ezekiel Nyaitok, who is the Director General, Nigeria First Project. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start this way, because, I mean, I've heard people, when the Army makes certain statements, some of them think, oh, whoa. It looks as if it's a thin line between the kind of comments they make in terms of making those comments in a democratic dispensation. Something where, is that supposed to be a police function or a military function? We know that sometimes we see the Army in conjunction with the police trying to secure a state. Some governors approve it. Some lawyers come and think, whoa, are we supposed to have that? Does the law allow that? So it looks as though that thin line is just there, and the country seems to have accepted it. Now let's go back memory lane, history. Let's look at the functions of the Army, how they got to where they are, before we even look at, does that have any direct bearing with our security challenge this morning? I mean, this currently at the moment.
Well, I think that there is a direct link, actually, because you know that old saying about those who do not learn the lessons of history are condemned to repeat it. And if we understand where we're coming from, both as a country and the institution called the Army, then we have a clear idea of why we are in the situation we're in. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. The Nigerian Army until the 1st of April 1958 was actually part of West Africa Command of the British Army and was led and officered by largely expatriate British officers. On the 1st of April 1958, control passed to the Nigerian government as part of the build-up to independence. And it's very significant that before the 1st of April 1958, although the Army had been put on standby for internal security operations, it had never actually deployed in that role. That changed when control passed to the Nigerian government. And it's very striking that there were, for example, uprisings in the Tiv region in 1961, in 1964, in 1965, and in the Western region in late 1965. That was something that the Army was repeatedly deployed in, and I don't think it's a coincidence that several of the people who were instrumental in the Army's first incursion into politics, i.e. the January 1966 coup, had also deployed on those internal security operations. And this was a very fundamental shift from what the Army was actually set up to do traditionally. Up until that point, the Army had acquitted itself well in peacekeeping operations in the Congo, and had done so very well with very, very great plaudits. Now, that was a very different thing to deploying an internal security operations in Nigeria, because those internal security operations were the result of a failure of the political process. That's why there was unrest. And so you had these young officers being now directly exposed to the consequences of the failure of politics. They also could see at first hand the interactions between their hierarchy and their political masters. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it took a year after that before the Army intruded itself into politics. This is something we must be very, very careful to avoid repeating.
Does that underscore some of the comments we hear when, for instance, former President Obasanjo, when he says, look, while he was trying to reshuffle, the reason he was, I think at some point, while he was explaining why he had to get rid of some or retire some top military officers, he said, he was quoted to have said, they've tasted politics. They can't focus as such on their professional duties. Is there any direct connection to that as well?
I think so. I think that when the Army departs from its fundamental role, which is to protect the territorial integrity of the country, to maintain the security of the people of the country, when it starts intruding itself into the political scene, and I'm not saying that it is at the moment, but I think it's something that we must be very careful that we don't allow to happen again, because we know the consequences of that. When that starts happening, I think that it is inevitable that it degrades the operational efficiency of the Army as an institution. And I'll give you another example. Let's think back to the First Republic. Now, between October 1960 and January 1966, the politics of Nigeria was turbulent. But and there was uprisings all over the place, we had never descended into fighting a war. The soldiers took over, and in 18 months we were at war. Very, very important. Now, why was that? Because soldiers are not adept at politics. Now, the example of how it degraded their operational efficiency is actually then what happened subsequently to that, the war I refer to. My personal view is that the war lasted a lot longer than it needed to have done, because actually on a strategic level, it was ineptly fought on both sides. And why was that? If you think about the degradation of the experienced officers that the Nigerian army had, and those that went on to the Biafran side, a large chunk of those senior experienced people were either dead as a result of the uprisings in January and July 1966, or they were in political positions, head of state, military governors, and so on and so forth. So actually those who prosecuted the war were people who were not as experienced and were given great degree of responsibility, which was not commensurate to their experience. And that, I think, is a primary reason why the war lasted as long as it did.
I mean, Mr. Ziko, you've been in politics. I've also heard some persons, most of them behind the scenes, when they say, well, the politicians who were amongst us were the cannon fodder. We spoke to them before we did certain things, some military officers at the time. So could it be that we're not learning from history, or is it that politicians have come to inherit that and see it as the new norm moving forward?
I think on the surface we could see it that way, but it's a much deeper problem. We in the past weeks particularly, I've been involved in so many strategy sessions trying to look at the problem of Nigeria, and at the bottom of the whole problem is what you call lack of purity. Lack of purity means that we don't know who a soldier is and what he's supposed to do, who a politician is and what he's supposed to do, where the boundaries are, who is a policeman, his core functions and responsibilities, and even the professionals. As a result, the army in particular, I do not know how many soldiers understand their core function, their core role, and their core responsibility.
Is it that we don't, or we deliberately gloss over some of them?
We honestly don't. It's that bad. It's so fundamental that the word sincerely wrong applies to a lot of people. If you look at, let me be very frontal, for instance. If you look at our president, there are several things he's done. I'm like, what's going on here? But if you look inside him, he is sincere. For instance, when you become the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, you lose your personal identity in a sense. You become the father of a nation. So your view is no longer, I'm from Akwa Ibom, I'm an Anang man. You lose that liberty.
That's an ideal setting.
That's what I'm saying.
Is that what it's
That's
now?
what every single situation, you must know the ideal setting. And then you must strive to work toward the ideal. That's why when people say, oh, you are being idealistic, it makes me really wonder if they understand what they are saying. Because in every situation, you must know the ideal and work as much as possible, because it is the ideal that produces the result we desire.